Good afternoon, and welcome to you all in the room and those watching online. Thank you very much for joining us today. You're attending the Leadership Track Breakout Session number 2, how to move from the passenger seat to the driver's seat, how to negotiate, persuade, and advocate for yourself. My name is Stephanie Gunter from VMware Education Services. I sit on the AirWatch side of the house, and I'll be your moderator today. We'll be together for about 45 minutes with a 15-minute Q&A at the end. There's a mic, or the mics will be runners. If you have questions, definitely raise your hand, and they'll come over and bring that mic to you towards the end of the session. Let's go ahead and meet our panel today. Yangbing Li. She is the Senior Vice President and General Manager for Storage and Availability Business Unit at VMware. She leads the P&L for a rich portfolio of products. She is responsible for product development, engineering, and the go-to-market success of this very high-growth business at VMware. During her 8-year tenure, she's held multiple executive leadership roles, and prior to VMware, she worked at Synopsys for 10 years. A couple of fun facts about her. You may have heard she's known as the high-tech girl in high heels. She was named one of the most powerful women engineers in 2015 by Business Insider. And she is a mother and enjoys managing a busy personal life, a stimulating career, and her 2 10-year-old twin girls are into programming and would like to either be video game designers or a tech company CEO if they don't have to give any speeches. Molly Anderson. Molly is the president and founder of Exponential Talent, LLC, which specializes in developing and implementing gender, diversity, and inclusion strategies for organizations. She's the co-author of The Corporate Lattice, Achieving High Performance in the Changing World of Work, which provides a roadmap for becoming CEO of your own career. Previously, she was the Director of Talent Strategy and Innovation for Deloitte, where she led several initiatives, including mass career customization, for which she holds a patent. She's a frequent speaker, and her articles have appeared in leading publications such as Bloomberg, Businessweek, Forbes, and CNBC, among others. She serves on the advisory board for Stanford University's Clayman Institute for Gender Research and is on the Stanford Graduate Business School of Task Force on Women. Fun facts, she has been very involved with Girl Scouts and Girl Scouts cookies and Girl Scout sales. And in a controversial decision, she prefers trefoils over Thin Mints. Lastly, Denise McInerney is a data professional with over 18 years of experience. She began her career as a database administrator and works as a data architect at Intuit, where she designs and implements BI and analytics solutions with a focus on enabling the work of analysts and business users. She's active in technical community organizations and serving currently as the Vice President of Marketing for PASS, an international organization of data professionals. She is also a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. She is a passionate proponent of advancing the cause of women in technology for over a decade, and she's founded the Women in Technology chapter of PASS and is active in the Tech Women at Intuit organization. 7 years ago, she and her husband adopted a rescue dog that needed lots of help, was her note. Dog training is now a hobby, and if she's not thinking about data, she's involved in a dog-related activity. So welcome to you all. Thank you. So let's shift to the panel discussion. I know you guys want to hear from these ladies. So Yangbing, I'd like to start with you to kick off the discussion. Can you tell us about a time when you were in the passenger seat in your career and actively moved to the driver's seat? Tell us about that, and how did that feel?
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And certainly great to be in great company of my panelists, fellow panelists, and all of the senior women around here. So I had a fairly long career in tech. My entire career is in tech. I had a PhD in computer engineering, and I went to become a researcher and a developer, and then get into management. So for the longest part of my career, I feel I was going with the flow. Certainly growing up in China, what we've learned, if you're good at school, you just get more school until there is no more school. Then you go to get a job, and so I was just really going with the flow. And this is around the time I turned 40. And I actually woke up. I realized I need to take charge of my career. And that's when I started to really strategizing and navigating my career. So first of all, so if you think about what's important to be a driver, taking the real life driving experience, you need to know where you're going, know your career destination, and also you need to have a very good way to navigate. So I defined my career destination. This is around the time I turned 40. I was just promoted from a senior manager to a director, so I was still fairly early in the career advancement, but I made a destination that I wanted to run a company and run real business, run a significant size company. So I want to become a CEO. And at the time, it seems like very outlandish or overly ambitious because it has no reflection of the reality. But I think the way I call it, this is defining your destination, your true calling, or your career North Star, give me incredible clarity, power, strength to move myself from a passenger seat to a driver's seat. And I've been managing my career that way. So not only it gives me clarity, it gives the people around me incredible clarity. So I was able to navigate my career paths from running engineering organization to running some operations, or running a larger organization, running core product development, running a business as I'm doing today, and really getting more and more aligned with my destination. So that's kind of how I woke up when I was no longer very young or fearless. It was a very bold and daring move. Or just suddenly I woke up, but it has been an incredibly powerful experience. I certainly love to share more as we have this conversation.
Excellent. That's a great example of moving into the driver's seat with your career. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Molly, a question for you. So getting to and staying in the driver's seat requires you to balance priorities and make daily decisions to follow those priorities. Can you talk about how you've navigated that through your career?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most important things in being in the driver's seat is learning how to say no and when to say no. And that was probably something I learned much too late in my career. But being able to look at an opportunity and not think just about how good that opportunity is, but what you might be missing out on, and being really clear if it's a fit for your priorities. So I remember when I was first coming back from maternity leave, and there was a great project in consulting working on something where I had written the first methodology, and it would be an enormous opportunity. But it was also a very political client with all kinds of angst. And I really thought about taking it because I was so entranced with the opportunity, and I got a lot of great counsel to walk away from it. And saying no to that opportunity, it turned out to be a disaster project. Everybody on that project was miserable 4 months later. A bunch of people left the company, and it would have really been a bad career move. And so I can become so hooked on the challenge that I'll sometimes say yes to something that sounds really exciting without making sure it's really on my plan. So I think that strategic no, and really making sure you think about what else you might be missing out on, because if you say yes, you're going to be committed to something. I think that's a huge help.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. A question, Denise. In your career, did you face a decision where you used your skills and experience to do what we're talking about today, negotiating, persuading, and advocating for yourself to move into the driver's seat?
Yeah, I have several examples of that, but one I want to share today. So this was maybe 8 years or so ago, and I had been in the role that I was in for a couple of years. And I was looking at the job description for the next click up, right? Same path, but next click up. And I thought, I'm doing most of that already, And it was almost time for review time, and I thought, oh, cool, I'm going to ask for promotion. So it was time for my one-on-one, and I thought, it was so obvious to me that I was already doing most of this job that surely it would be obvious to my manager. So I went in really thinking it was pro forma, and was shocked when he said no. And he just said no. Like, he didn't say, I'll think about it. He said, no. And I was really stunned, but I had enough presence of mind to sort of ask him questions. And because I hadn't expected resistance, I didn't go in completely armed, right? And so I'm sort of arguing from a position of, some of the facts, but mostly emotion, and plus I'm kind of mad and all that. So disappointed. I think the word I used with him was, I'm very disappointed. But I went through the one-on-one, and I tried to argue my case, but really didn't get any traction. And I left, and I had enough presence of mind to sort of type up some notes real quick of his objections. And then I thought about it, and I talked to some coworkers, and it was interesting because I kind of got discouraged by people. Oh, well, that's how it is. Oh, well, you tried. I'm a little stubborn, right? So I spent a bunch of time writing it up. So I went through his objections and I found responses to them. I got feedback from other coworkers who had worked with me. So I had like little testimonials. I went through the job description and I marked it up in highlighter, like the things I was already doing. And then I wrote the email sort of, referencing all those things. And I packaged it all up. And I worked on it for quite a while and had other people read it and stuff. And I sent it off. And I waited. And after a week, I couldn't stand it because I hadn't heard anything. So I popped my head in his office. I said, hey, did you happen to see that email? And he goes, I saw it. I was like, good email. I'm working on it. I was like, oh, okay. And off I went. Okay, I got the promotion. And I felt really happy that I had taken the chance. Now, there was no guarantee I was going to get it. But there was a guarantee if I didn't try, that no was going to stick. Right? So either I was going to stay at the same level, which was going to slow my career trajectory. I was going to be frustrated and leave, which would have been probably worse on the company than me. Or I was going to stay and be frustrated, and the company wasn't going to get the benefit of what I was able to do at that next level. So it wasn't just about me and my career, which of course it was, primarily for me, but it was also about the fact that I was already acting as if, right? Promotions are always the trailing indicator, right? Not the leading indicator. By the time you get the promotion, you're essentially doing the job, or at least part of it, right? So that gave me a bigger stage to play on, which actually increased my contributions and benefited the company as well as my own career. So that's sort of my best story of taking the driver's seat.
That's excellent, and a great example of advocating for yourself. So many times we expect someone, or we hope that someone will see what we're doing and give us that promotion or that acknowledgement. Being able to really step into that driver's seat is really important there. Great example. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to shift to a couple lessons learned throughout your career. So a few more questions here. Molly, a question for you. So a roadmap is crucial to success. Could you discuss how you keep to following that path despite maybe a crash, an obstacle, a detour, or maybe a wrong turn?
One of the things I like to do is think about having option value in your career. So a lot of the career coaching is sometimes about having a single destination, and you can have that long-term goal. But in today's fast-changing world, there can be a lot of risk if you're too locked into any one thing. And so what's the way that you hedge risk in your financial portfolio? You diversify, and you have kind of multiple things you're thinking about doing. So I think a great thing is to be able at any point in time to have multiple directions where you might step sideways, where you might want to step up, where you might want to step into something new. So that then if something doesn't pan out, if you take a risk, if you take a step forward and it's not what you want or didn't go the way you wanted or was a big learning opportunity, that you've always got other directions that you can move. And I think always having some other things in the back of your mind is going to make you feel more confident that everything's not rating on this. One of the things we know from the research is women sometimes aren't given as much direct feedback as the men are. And so sometimes when you take a risk, and a lot of times when we're learning, it doesn't always go perfectly on day one. Most of my biggest learning experiences did not go perfectly at all. But getting all the feedback and going through that process can sometimes be painful if you haven't been acclimated to it through your whole career. So don't let that stop you from continuing to push forward.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Yang Bing, a question for you. You have steadfastly pursued and driven towards that clear goal and that North Star. Has that ever backfired for you?
Absolutely. I think this, when I set out my goal, it just seems like so far-reaching. I kept it to myself for some time. Now I started to publicly discuss my personal career goal. I think in general for people who are more senior to me, they see it as very, very positive. They see you as someone with purpose, with clear objective, with determination. But sometimes I find my peers or people in my team may not be as comfortable, especially sometimes people assume because you're so relentlessly pursuing your personal goal, you must be doing that at the cost of your support for the team. So I did find that sometimes I have to balance that message. But reflecting back, I would say certainly the lesson learned is you need to make sure as you advance yourself, continue to focus how you make people around you to be more successful. But I don't regret publicly declaring my goal because it has opened many doors. It has given me more opportunity and more support and more respect from people than I've ever expected. So I think I felt it was totally the right thing to do despite some of the side effects we sometimes experience.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you so much. Denise, a question for you. As we're driving, what tools should we be keeping in our roadside assistance kit?
We're going to bend this metaphor.
We are.
So I can bend it even further. So one of the things that I have considered a huge help for me throughout has been the sponsorship, and specifically the sponsors helped me in my career. Right? A lot of times we talk about mentorship, which is important. Mentors are people who talk to you and help you figure things out, and sponsors are people who talk about you and your work. And sponsors are an intrinsic part of continuing either up the ladder or getting a new role or trying a new thing, because you need people who are advocating for you when you're not in the room. So this is how I'll fit it with the metaphor. I'm like the navigation system, because the sponsor is actually driving, right? This is somebody who's probably at a higher level in the organization, who has more influence, right? And I'm helping them speak for me by talking to them about what I'm doing. I give them examples of my projects. I have lunch with them and say, hey, I did this really cool thing. And so I'm basically writing the script, right? I'm giving them the material to talk about what I'm doing. Now, the great thing about sponsorship relationships is that good sponsees make the sponsor look good. Sponsors love it, right? You're doing all the work, right? That's how one of my sponsors describes it. You're doing all the work. And if you do it really well, and this is one of my best advocates who actually helped navigate me through to the point where I got promoted to architect, once he had something to work with, he had a couple projects that I'd done, he got me in front of, it must have been a dozen different groups, just to present, hey, did you hear this cool thing Denise did? And he'd get me in front of a staff meeting, or he'd get me in front of a brown bag. And so my professional profile within the company grew significantly because of that. And that's because once you get up to a certain level, it's not your line manager that makes the difference in terms of you get promotion, at least not in our organization. It's all the people at the level you're aspiring to, understanding what you can bring to the table, right? So my roadside assistance kit includes a good navigation system, which is me talking to the driver who are my sponsors. And everyone needs sponsors in their career, no matter what you're trying to do.
And what I love about what you did, too, is one of the bias dynamics you sometimes hit is that the research shows sometimes when women self-promote, it's held against them. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't self-promote, but it does mean we have to be strategic about how we do it. So in your example, you were able to do a one-on-one interaction and talk about all your great accomplishments, but then get the advocacy out to the organization coming from somebody else. That is hugely powerful. Just love what you did. And that's one of the ways you can still be a great advocate for yourself, but not get that backlash.
Yeah, I want to add to the toolkit, the navigation, when I think about it, is absolutely the mentors and sponsors. I have experience when I feel I hit a roadblock, or sometimes I have to take a detour, and sometimes I feel I crashed and have to restart. And it's at those, important points. Denise was giving an example when she was actually promoted. I felt is when I was seriously in trouble, or even my sponsor or mentor can be my insurance policy, because when you crash and in a really dire state, they're the one who help you, go back into the driver's seat. Can't emphasize enough the power of that.
Excellent. That's great. And I love that you all were able to support and jump in with your opinions there. I was going to ask that as well, which is perfect. That's awesome. So a few additional questions, then I know we'll be opening it up for the audience shortly. How have you managed distractions? And I'll open this up to you guys, to all of you three. How have you managed distractions that have maybe pulled your focus from that driver's seat in the road ahead? So where you have your clear North Star and your clear goal, we constantly are seeing distractions that are pulling us, either personal life or work life. So how have you managed that as you've been navigating through to advance your career? Yanbing, do we want to start with you, possibly?
Since you've mentioned the personal life, I do think that sometimes is a distraction. We love hearing Ariana speaking about, thrive and 8 hours of sleep. But I kind of reflected when I was a young mother with 3 kids, all under the 2 years old, and I was literally waking up 10 times a night. And so at that time, I feel sometimes it's such a difficult thing to choose how you stay in your driver's seat for your career, because there are lots of things that you don't have choice. That's whether it's your time, it's your energy, your priority has already been taken up. And I do think reflecting in those days, especially when I was mom with young children, that was really a difficult thing to think about. And the way I've learned over the years, not only my kids got bigger, it's easier to manage, is really to get over with myself. So I had an incident where my son was going to an emergency room at one night, and there was an unpleasant situation. And the next day, I had a full days of meetings and engagement and things you can't refuse. He came back from the emergency room. My husband was able to stay home. But I was just thinking, okay, how do I approach the day ahead of me? I can be either just be a really downer and constantly think about my son, or I have a choice to go back to my driver's seat and just fully engage, because he has been taken care of. His health situation has has improved, and my husband is spending the full day with him. But those are the hardest, the moments of, it really puts you under test. What do you choose?
Absolutely, no, that's a great example.
And one of the things I always try and keep in mind, if you start working when you graduate from college at, say, 22, or maybe there's some graduate school, so it might be later, and you work into your 60s, right, that's like a 40-year career. So if there's a 5-year period even, right, where you are going to make some different choices, that doesn't mean you have to give up on your long-term goals. 40 years is a lot of time to make things happen. So for me, I've dialed my career up and down at different points in time. When my kids were little, I left Deloitte and had some consulting work that I did on my own. And then when my kids got older, when they were about 6 and 9, my husband and I flip-flopped roles. And he stayed at home and worked part-time, and I went back to a hard-charging role at Deloitte in a senior leadership role and lived on airplanes and did all of those kinds of good things. And so I don't think you have to give up on those long-term goals and ambitions, but that it's okay to give yourself permission to make different choices at different points in time and move it up and down. I mean, careers are just so much longer than they used to be. And I sometimes want to scream when Fortune comes out with things like 40 under 40 or 30 under 30 or whatever the numbers are. Because sometimes if you're making some of those choices earlier in your career, when you hit certain milestones, may be different than, quote, the age you're supposed to hit it at. But there's so much you can do now. So I think really being able to realize it's not giving up on anything to make different choices at different points in time.
I think, too, I love that because it is 40 years, isn't it? So even if you change a job for a year, it's not the end of the world, right? Yeah. So and I had some experiences where the distractions, or what seemed to be a distraction, actually turned out to be a big opportunity. So maybe 5 years ago now, it's one of those, boss drops by at my desk and says, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And you think, oh, sure. Yeah, it was a reorg, right? So corporate world, it happens, yeah? So, and suddenly I had a new job. And I went from being a database administrator to being a data analyst, a job I had literally never done. And they knew that. They said, we need somebody to start doing analytics here, and we know you know the data, and we think you'd be good at it, so can you try? And I was like, what did I have to lose, right? And what my manager said was, look, you're not marrying it, right? If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out, And I'd literally never done the job. And nothing so scary, right, as to walk into a business review and being supposedly presenting the business results from last week when you, right? You figure it out. So, and in the end, I did that job for about a year. It was a gift for so many reasons. For one thing, I was getting a business perspective, which no matter how much we love the tech, it's all there to support a business at the end of the day, or an organization, right? So I got a seat at a table with the business leaders, which I wouldn't have had before. It inspired me to actually go from being sort of a DBA to working on analytics systems, which is what I do now. And I spent a year walking in the moccasins of the people who are now my customers, right? Nothing better for customer empathy than that, right, than actually doing their job. But at the time, I was terrified. I was looking for the exit signs, right, from third days, right? But it turned out to be a gift, right, and not a distraction. So even if you're scared in the beginning, just ride it out for a little while. Because there's always going to be another job, there's always another company, there's always another role. It's 40 years. Thanks, Molly.
That's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, 40 years is a long time.
40 years is a long time, folks.
And that's a great recommendation for us to be thinking of that. I love that your career can ebb and flow. It doesn't always have to be, hard driving all the way. So that's great. Excellent. Thank you so much. So another question, asking for directions, and again, we're continuing with the metaphor here, asking for directions can be perceived sometimes as a weakness. So how would you guide someone who is unsure maybe of the next step in their path or what they should take? Someone like to start there?
Sure. So,
okay, Denise.
The thing is, no matter how, everyone has imposter syndrome, right? Somebody talked about it earlier, Ariana talked about it earlier, right? So when you're in these rooms and these really super smart people are talking, I promise you, at least part of the time, they're fronting, right? They don't all know all the answers all the time, and that's okay, right? So don't be afraid to ask the questions. And a lot of times when you ask a question, 2 or 3 other people in the room have the same question, especially if it's on a technology. Tech changes so quickly, right? You walk into a room and someone says, I read about XYZ, and we should start programming in this. And he's read about it, but maybe the rest of the room hasn't. It's okay to ask questions. Hey, what does it do? Where does it fit in the environment? How are you thinking about it? That's nothing to be scared of. No one's going to judge you for not, well, if they are, you don't need them. If they're really judging you for asking questions, move on. And yeah, I would just say get over that fear of looking like you're going to be the dumb one in the room.
So one of the things I recommend is a lot of times when you're not clear on your directions because you don't have enough information. You don't know what other kinds of jobs and roles are like, and you don't have a sense of how you would react to it or what all the kinds of circumstances that you thrive in are. And one of the things that fuels that is that women have sometimes narrower professional networks than men do. And actually the research from like Herminia Ibarra, who's over in Europe, is that men's networks, their personal and their professional networks overlap a lot. So when they're out on the basketball court or the golf course, they're also exchanging a lot of information about work, about this job or what this was like or whatever. And women have very separate personal and professional networks quite often. And so that can really limit your access to information. So start networking, do information interviews, take friends of friends out to lunch, really ask people what their jobs and roles are about, what they love and hate. I have found so many people that when they really reach out to their network and meet people that are really foreign to them, that they get some data points they didn't have, and it just creates this clarity that's amazing. So I think that can be really helpful.
I just want to add one point. I personally found reaching out for help or asking questions is the most powerful way to flatter whoever you're reaching out for, and is the best way to build a long-lasting relationship or mentorship or sponsorship. I find that to be true, and this is also backed by real, human psychology research. So I've sometimes.
I love your way of framing that, because I often hear people say, "I don't want to bother them." And really think about it as flattering them. It's beautiful.
Absolutely, and because people always like to talk about what they know and talk about themselves. So if you approach them, because I've been approached sometimes, say, can you mentor me? And if people have approached me, say, Yanbing, here's a business question I'm trying to solve, and you are the domain expert, and if we click on that topic, it's, that's a foundation for a long-lasting relationship. So I find it work all the time, especially for senior people you really want to approach. You approach with a good question or good business topics that's important to you, but also relevant to them.
That's great. So we're about to ask the audience for some questions. I did have one last one that I wanted to ask you all. Where would you guide someone as a next step or a call to action to get into the driver's seat? What would be their next step in looking at their career and moving again from that passenger seat to the driver's seat? We've talked about a lot of different ideas and suggestions. What would be maybe a call to action or a next step for the women that are in the room?
I think we talk about destination. I still challenge people to think about whether you have it clearly defined. And sometimes even, the very far-reaching one seems to be so abstract and irrelevant. I find it extremely powerful. And we can start to take, the challenges that you go through today, whether you're looking at negotiating for a promotion or trying to influence your cross-function team over a certain business outcome. Think what would be the different actions you would take or language you have about, putting yourself in a driver's seat rather than, for those decisions to be forced upon you. So start acting today, but with a very long-range destination in mind.
Excellent. Okay, great.
I would probably say I loved Ariana Huffington's phrase this morning, don't settle. and to really challenge yourself. Are you settling? Maybe you're thinking, well, I can't get the work I really want with the work life I want. Or, is there some way in which you're settling? And then really challenge yourself. Can you push that assumption?
So one call to action that anyone can do, no matter where you are in the organization, is pick one person that you admire, a leader of another group, maybe somebody who's in a level that you aspire to, and make a connection with them. Ask for coffee, ask for lunch, and make that connection and start the conversation. And don't start with, will you mentor me? Start with talking to them about something related to a project, the company, a product, anything, and start to make that connection, and that connection will lead to more connections. And the more you're exposed to people who are doing something that you might want to do, the more you're going to be able to figure out how to get there yourself.
That's excellent. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Do we have questions from the audience? If you want to raise your hand, and they'll bring the microphone over.
There's one up here.
Yeah.
Hi. So my question is about. Hi. My name is Neha. Nice to meet you. My question is about when you've been pushing very hard for that next step, and when you hit that next step, it gets really scary because all of a sudden you're in this new role and you have these new expectations. What do you do to prepare and to mitigate those risks that you're now opening yourself up to in this new position or opportunity?
I was just asked that question when I was recently promoted to the general manager, and one of my team members asked me, Yanbei, you must be so scared because there's so many new things. And I just think, gosh, I've so gotten over that stage. So along the way the first time I overcome fear was when I was first promoted to vice president and my responsibility suddenly exposed, and I was just thinking about this is the first time this job can get me fired at any time. Because previously, when you're lower in the hierarchy, as long as you do a good job, you have pretty good job security. But then I think about the risk of being fired from my job versus the risk of the opportunity I lose for not stepping into that job. It's just the latter is so much greater. So that became my, pill of confidence. I'm going to get so much of this, despite I could fail, I could be fired, but I would have the levels of experience and learning and exposure and all the good things you have with this new enlarged role that I wouldn't have in my previous role. So that gave me a lot of confidence, and so now I would say I approach everything fearlessly. So that's how I got over it.
Would you all have anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually. So when I got promoted to architect, which was about 18 months ago, that was kind of a big jump from where I was. You're on a different, at least in our company, playing on a different field. And so am I doing this right? What is this job really? What is this job? What am I supposed to be doing? Constant communication, not only with my own manager to make sure his expectations were being met, but I talked to a bunch of other people sort of at that level, which at Intuit would be architects and principal engineers. I watched them, for one thing. What do they do? How do they act? And I talked to several of them that I thought were effective about, hey, how did you approach this? And I figured something out, right? Everybody does the job a little bit differently. There was no one right way to do it, and I could make it my own once I sort of understood what was going on. And there was an added thing for me, which at the time that I got the role, I became the only female architect in the division. There were female architects in other divisions, but I was the only one there. And I felt internally, and for my coworkers who are in the audience, probably the first time I've said this out loud, a real responsibility to not mess it up, right? Really. Now there are 4 of us, so it's more like a little sisterhood in there. But the fear, it wasn't fear, it was responsibility. I felt an obligation and a responsibility to do it well, and to be, they always say if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so I thought of all the software engineers, coming up, who finally were seeing a woman in an architect job in front of the room, and what that meant to them, and that sort of gave me the motivation, right? That's great.
Yeah, and I think you got to kind of welcome some of that fear, because it means you are taking a risk, right? If you're not ever feeling that kind of gnawing in the pit of your stomach, you're still in a comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so over time, I think training yourself to say, oh, I'm feeling that gnawing feeling in my stomach, and just sort of welcoming it. It's a little uncomfortable, but it means you're growing.
Yeah, I love that.
That's great, thank you. There was a question over here.
Hi, my name is Pratima Rao. I'm a senior manager at VMware. So my question is, I turned 40 last year, and the first thing that happened with me was I want to go start my own company. And
That's great.
I had this business idea and things like that. So I kind of relate to that. I just haven't jumped off the cliff yet. But I've also been accused in my career of being very aggressive. And you kind of said something, Yangbing, where you said you had this personal goal which you were pursuing, and you felt like you didn't get the support of your peers or people that report into you. But do you feel that it's more gender biased there? Because I feel like people tell me I'm aggressive, but I've never had people tell men that they're aggressive when they have an ambitious goal that they set for themselves. So have you found that in your career or any of the other panelists?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the reaction from my peers or my team is not all negative. I think there is lots of support, but there are some. I would say I still get more support than the doubt I've got. But I have to admit that there is quite a bit of gender bias toward this. I was doing a couple of rounds of 360 assessment from the various performance or coaching exercise I was engaged in, and I would always get those comments. Because Yanbing is more focused on moving her career forward, we are not sure whether her levels of commitment to today's job. And all my coach basically just ignore that. And I've seen this with two coaches, two different coaches I've worked with. They basically say, yeah, there is so much bias toward women, especially being very ambitious.
And this is true in the research. So Clayman Institute is doing some research with some companies in the Valley and some companies outside of tech where they get all the performance evaluations, and they do language analysis. And one of the most common things that's different about the men and the women's performance reviews is that women are told they're too aggressive, too brash, too assertive, that women are given tons of feedback about their communication style. Sometimes people love it. I really like them. She's really friendly. She's nice. Sometimes they want it changed, but they get tons of feedback, almost to a point of they're getting all their feedback about communication style and not getting any feedback about coding skills or how well they manage a budget or some of these core business and technical kinds of skills. So this is something we have to be aware of. It's typically not conscious. It's typically unconscious. And learn what are some ways that we can start to navigate that. But that absolutely has been documented in the research.
And I can tell you my personal experience as well. So, yes, I've been told I was too aggressive. Could you soften it? Could you take it easy? And, it can be quite frustrating, right? And you get sort of like fed up with it. And I finally started to figure out that this was more a reflection of my manager being inadequate or incompetent at giving feedback, or just unpracticed at really, right? Because so I started trying to take more charge of those sorts of conversations and asking specific questions. Okay, what technology should I learn, or what kind of project should I be doing, to try to draw it out a little bit more. And then I realized there was some tipping point. It happened a couple years ago where all that personality feedback stopped. Now it's all about the tech, and I don't know if that's just the level I'm working for or the people I'm working for now that have a different, more mature perspective on things. You just get power on, just power through it. And a month or so ago, somebody told me I was too nice in a feedback session. I thought, this is a new high for me, right?
That's great. We had a question up here in the front. A question up here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wendy Caldwell. I work for VMware. So when I arrived from Seattle at the airport, I walked up to my rental car. I'm picking up on the analogy here. Mm-hmm. And it was a Prius, and I've rented those before, but it's been a really long time. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to jump into the driver's seat of this thing and figure it out. So sometimes you're getting into the driver's seat of something you're not familiar with. And that's fine. But how do you ask for that safety net when you're jumping into a new role that you're not 100% qualified to do? It's a car you haven't driven. How do you ask for the safety net from the people who you're going to be working with?
Why do you think even you get that job if your manager don't even think you're qualified to do. So this is again the self-doubt talk we always have. I love what Denise put it. Normally, when you earn a promotion, you've already been operating at that level for some time. You've already demonstrated enough readiness and competence that you can do the job. Obviously, there's still that learning curve. But don't underestimate, how you're viewed as ready for that job by.
Well, I guess I should add this is not within the same organization. So I am considering a jump into a different organization. I'm an unknown entity. So I'm going to need more of a safety net there as part of the support.
The first rule of negotiation is don't be afraid to ask for what you want, right? So, but one of the things you want to do in negotiating is frame it as a win-win. And so you want to think about what the value proposition to the organization is and be able to help make a case. Sometimes you do take a move and you do it without a safety net, and if it doesn't go well, you're looking for a different job or something. There can be a huge amount of learning in that, because I find a lot of people underestimate how employable they are. And so, first challenge yourself. Do you have to have the safety net? But there are times in life we do, right? So there are absolutely moments where we need that safety net. So don't be afraid to ask for it, but remember to think about how valuable you are to the company and how much benefit it could produce them. Because a lot of times I get coaching conversations with people where they're really framing in terms of what I want and I need, and they're forgetting how much value it's going to offer the organization because they're an amazing contributor.
Any last comments to add?
Sure, I have a quick example. So in a conversation about a woman who's being asked to interview for a role, and she was worried about it. It was more responsibility, and she spent, I don't know how long, ticking off to me all the ways failure could happen, right? And I finally looked at her and said, okay, what does success look like? I would use that same example to you, right? So yes, there's lots of ways this could fall apart, and you will need a safety net. But the more important conversation with the folks who matter in this organization is, what does success in this role look like? And that constant conversation about, okay, checking in, so that the safety net's not needed.
In a study HP did years ago, women would only apply for a job if they met 100% of the qualifications, and men will apply at 60%. So when you're doing the safety net calculation, you may be thinking 100%. And just be aware that a lot of folks are very, very successful at 60%, and so that can also help you challenge your own perspectives.
That's excellent. Well, thank you all three very much for your incredible careers that you have and being able to share with us. We absolutely appreciate it. Thank you all for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.